Hi, everybody. Oh, hang on. Sorry, big blue button I have to click off. We are so professional this morning. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Suzi Walsh, who is one of the busiest behaviourists in Ireland, I have to say. And how long has it been since we've seen each other? 14 years, 15 years?
Oh gosh.
A long, 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 long time. And well, she hasn't changed a day. So, delighted to have you on because we are going to be discussing something I absolutely love and I feel is so important to set your puppy up right from the very start is socialization. It's something that we all know the terminology, we all know the buzzwords. We've all read the blurbs about what you should and shouldn't do, and it's so easy to get wrong anyway. So Suzi is actually an expert in puppy development, but socialization is not just for puppies. It's also if you have adopted an older dog, um, senior dogs, foreign rescue dogs, they all need it. So, and it's a daily thing. It's not something you just do for a few weeks, that little window of opportunity, and that's it. You forget about it. That's not how it works. It's a continuation. So I'm going to stop yabbering on and hand you over to our expert. Welcome, Suzi.
Thank you for having me. And it's a topic I'm incredibly passionate about. And because obviously I work with a huge number of behavior problems, and a lot of them could be vastly improved by, proper socialization. So I suppose the big question is, what is socialization? So, and what is it not? Because it's a kind of a funny term, I find, because people think it's, oh, I need to bring my dog to the park to play with lots of other dogs, and they need to interact and be jumping up and down on top of each other. And it's just dogs and people, but actually, in fact, it's not that. It's a lot of the time it's everything. So it's for everything from environment to smells to sounds to other species and handling and all of those kind of experiences that your puppy might have in a pet home that they might not be used to as an individual species, and obviously prior to coming to your family home. So yeah, I think that's probably the most important to lay out what it is. And then for me, people, and I know for you, Denise, as well, because you would have known this from, the amount of puppies that you've raised. You're not getting a blank canvas or a blank slate when you do. People think when they get their 8 or their 10-week-old puppy that this is just a brand new puppy, that they have brand new starting from scratch and they have no previous history. But in fact, we have a lot of previous history. Not only that puppy's first few weeks of life, those which are so important, but also you have the history, like what was life like when they were in the womb, what was their parents' experiences, and all of that kind of thing. So that kind of neurodevelopmental stages, and that people forget that it's not just your puppy on in their own isolation. It's the impact that previous generations may have had. Like if your puppy grows up with their in when their mom was stressed and they were stressed while they were in the womb when the mother was pregnant, that also has a knock-on effect. And what you're trying to strive for when we get dogs that are super tolerant and super resilient is that neuroplasticity. So when you get a puppy that can adapt from one thing to another thing, and whether they're hurt or whether they're frightened or something sudden happens, and that's the kind of thing that we all hope for, is that we have a dog who's really, their brain is quite malleable and plastic, so they can kind of not be worried or be afraid, and kind of like just like a human being. You'll know some people who get very stressed over very minor things, and then you'll know some people who are completely chilled no matter what is going on. And that's the kind of bomb proof scenario that we want for our puppies, or want for our dogs, because that allows them to have I suppose, a stress free life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, there's an awful lot of literature out there. There's telling people how to socialize, and it's terrifying when you actually see it because everybody thinks they only have a few weeks from the time the puppy comes to get all this crammed in. And then we're looking at flooding. The poor animal is like shoved on escalators, put into lifts, dragged upstairs, introduced to every species under the sun, shoved into other dogs' faces. Um, God, the amount of times I have been out, and you can always tell a new dog owner. The dog is on an extension lead, rocketing across the field at you, all excited, and the poor owner is kind of grinning nervously, being dragged behind them. It's all right. I'm just socializing them. I was like, no. So, what advice would you give people to stop doing that? Because someday that poor dog is going to be socialized with the wrong dog. It's going to go up into the face. It's going to get snapped. It's going to have a bad experience. I mean, to me, socialization wouldn't really be a word I'd be using. It'd be more like life enrichment, life skills, good experiences. It's all about positive
Yeah,
experiences.
I think you're spot on. Yeah, I love that idea of life enrichment and life skills. It's actually there are two way more appropriate terms for what we're looking for people to do. And there's far less confusion when you use that kind of terminology. And what I usually say to people, especially when they first get their puppy, I'm very much like you. It's gradual, gentle exposure. We don't want a rocketing puppy across the park, flying around, zooming around in everybody's faces, or even one that's being dragged down the road because they're nervous. We want gradual exposure and continuous gradual exposure. So I'll often tell people to bring their puppy for a walk in their arms, no matter how confident they are or not, when they get the puppy, or even sit on their doorstep and, maybe feed the puppy in their arms while on their knee, all of that kind of stuff. So they get to, like a small child or like a small baby, they get exposure at a lower level of stimulus, and from the safety of your arms, and that kind of comfort and security before you'd even put them on the ground. And then from that moment onwards, I would be very encouraging for people to make sure that not exactly like you said there, socialization is not allowing your puppy into the face of any other dog. One, the big important thing is we don't know how that other dog is going to
Mm-hmm.
respond, and then you might have 4 or 5 really good incidences, and then you'll get the so-called, oh, the dog reacts and is putting their puppy in their place, and that's actually really not what we want. We want our puppy to have all really nice experiences, but they don't have to be going to a party in order to do that. We want them calm. So often I'll get people from day one is bring some treats with them, and when they're walking their puppy down the road, anything that their puppy fixates on, be it another dog or a person or a bus, give them a little treat, or allow them to watch them from a distance and try and reward them for calm behavior, because we want our dogs to be able to approach and have a little bit of composure, whether your dog is nervous at the beginning or very either or really really enthusiastic about the world. We want calmness, because calmness will allow the brain to kind of process information at a better rate, so that bad decisions aren't made on the puppy's behalf and they don't make as many mistakes. So I'll often get people to associate it, kind of as dogs do, associative learning, having their treat or even their dinner or whatever way you want to do it, with going for a walk, going to see another dog, they get a treat. And so the puppy starts to, when they see another dog or a person or a bus, they start to engage with the handler, the owner, the guardian. So the puppy starts to go, oh, there's a dog, where's my treat? There's a dog, where's my treat? And as a result, you're incidentally rewarding for calm behavior when we're seeing all of these things in the big wide world. And then when your puppy is ready, they can meet at a calmer state, and not like a rocket ship, for very brief periods of time, so 1 or 2 seconds, with appropriate dogs. It's all good and have play with appropriate age groups, and that's why I love a really good puppy class. So a really good puppy class with somebody that's knowledgeable, who's going to be able to show you what good puppy play is, and not have the intensity of just going off and the puppy playing for long periods of time, and there's lots of breaks, and you might have appropriately sized puppies and the appropriate number of puppies and appropriate supervising and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that can be really, really important. And that's a lot of the time what we're lacking here in Ireland, because there tend to be more progressive about puppy
Mm.
socialization or life skills classes in other countries. We tend to just jam them in and not necessarily observe their play, and just give it's a little bit of a free for all, without kind of any guardian involvement or any kind of, there's no calm in it. It's just often I see them out playing, and it's just kind of chaotic. And then your puppy can often learn from that. And then your puppy ends up with poor social skills. And as they get bigger, especially if you've got a very high energy breed or very strong breed, then you're wondering why your puppy or why that adolescent dog is going in and just mowing other dogs over. And they're not going to make friends that way, and they're not going to have good social experiences. And then they get more lead restriction, and then they get more panicked behavior from owners and maybe corrections on the lead and all of that kind of stuff. And then you're into a whole different ball game of potential leash reactivity and fearful behavior or lunging behavior or barking behavior. And that's when you end up seeing someone like me. And that's kind of costly and time consuming. And we want to prevent all of that.
You get the
Yeah,
same thing, the same sort of issue though with people that they have the little puppy and then they hand them to every single person in the world. So the puppy all gets these hands going over the head, over the head, over the head. So, and I think it's worse when you've got things like a cockapoo puppy, little tiny little fluffy ball of whatever, and then every child, every person, they all want to stop. So if you're talking to a person who has a little fluffy pup, what's your advice as far as human socializing is concerned?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. I hear nothing. What they used to be, I'm 18 years doing this, and previously they used to have, puppy parties where you were told to hand your puppy around to everybody.
I
But we really
remember
didn't
that.
think about actually, yeah, do you remember that?
Yeah,
Actually, just hand them to as many people as you can.
and
But the
pretend
problem
to
with
do
that
the
is
vet
that,
checks. Do you remember that?
yeah,
Put them on a table and
yeah,
get everybody to pretend to do a vet check on your pup.
and
That's
everyone's against them.
traumatizing.
So traumatizing when you think of it now. And we all thought we were doing all the right things, and thankfully, I was never at the point where we were. I was never from the camp of terribly averse of training, but that is something that we were told to do, and it's so you can imagine. I always compare it to remember when you were little. And you would have people come up and they'd pat you on the head and they'd pull your cheeks and kind of give you hugs, or you were told to give someone a hug or a kiss, and you mightn't have felt comfortable in that scenario at all. And then what happens is you get nervous and anxious around people. Well, the same happens for your puppy. The same happens from a consent point of view for your dog, even though they are a dog. They're species unto themselves. And so what happens is then you get a puppy that starts to become fearful, doesn't want people to pet them, and then we wonder why puppies and dogs snap at them. So what we should be doing in that kind of scenario is, well, one, I'm a big fan. I don't know how you guys feel. I love your opinion on this. I would teach my puppy from a young age to hand target without a cue, so that like I would describe it, teaching someone to do a handshake so that they're not threatened by this gesture of hands approaching them, because it's inevitable. No matter, even if you tell people not to touch your puppy or if you keep your puppy protected, they're going to get hands flying at them no matter what. So I like to teach them that when a hand comes out, that the puppy touches them, and then they go back to their guardian or their owner, their person, to get a treat, not from the person that's actually put out their hand. And so we find that they find that situation less aversive. But also, obviously, don't, I would be very much of a mindset as, if your puppy chooses to go up to somebody, that's very, very different than, passing them from one person to the other. And there needs to be a lack of control there, because you can't just have your puppy flying up to everybody and then wonder later on why your puppy is jumping at someone or mouthing somebody, or, has no, self-control around, because everybody is touching them. Because everybody has, no matter how careful you are, there'll always be people that say, I don't mind if he jumps on me. I don't mind if he does that.
Yeah, or
And
I
then
love dogs. Dogs love me.
love me. It's not a
Oh,
problem. Yeah, and they stick out their hands anyway. And the dog, they can't read body language, which we don't expect everyone to be able to read body language, but you often see, what I'll say to people is, I show me a picture online where a dog is happy being cuddled by a small child. We all look at the child smiling and beaming, but any of these images, even on Google, the dog is like, please stop. And their body language is just never happy. But nobody seems to see that, because we tend to focus on the child and the picture of the cute dog and the child. But you can build tolerance and resistance to a certain extent with a dog. But that's not going to happen from, as you said, flooding or from handing the dog to everybody on the planet. So I would keep interactions kind of short and sweet, and I'd also pleasant, or even get people playing games with your dog, or even I do a lot of settle training, so engaging with the dog when they're calm and relaxed if they want to, watching for body language, any kind of lip licking or avoidance behavior, and tackling it. If you find that you have a nervous puppy, or you have a puppy that's kind of a little bit anxious, do get help. Get help from the get-go. Don't just go into the abyss of the internet. there, I never mind, for example, anyone phoning me. It doesn't mean that if you can afford a consult or not. I'll always have a quick chat to someone to point them in the right direction. Listen, I'm thankfully so busy that if I can avoid seeing people or having to help people in person, then I will do so. I don't know if everyone is like that, but at least I'd be able to point you in the right direction because at a right starting point. And sometimes people only need just a little bit of help and advice, but make sure when you're looking for advice, you're looking for someone, online. I know this is probably a little different tangent, but look at who's giving you the advice. Look at what investment they put into their education. Because I'm sorry, we do have, thankfully, qualifications in dog behavior and dog training, and really, really good ones. And there's no one born, with a book in their hand going, I'm knowledgeable about all dogs. If you're interested in your profession and you're working that profession, you should be educating yourself to the best possible standard that you can. Otherwise, you don't care. I'm not being funny. You can't, no one is born. I certainly haven't met anyone born with just the ability of dogs. There are people that are really good with dogs, absolutely. But that doesn't mean the ins and outs of, dog body language and, how dogs learn and all of those, the complex nature of another species.
I have to say, like, I do find a lot of people don't know when to ask for help because they think it's a growing phase or the dog will grow out of it. Because that's a lot of the advice that they're being given. It's like, oh, it's only young, it'll grow out of it. I had a beagle for recall, and the beagle was 8 years old because they thought that it would grow out of it.
Yeah.
Thought, well, it's 8 now, so it's not going to grow out of it. You actually do have to put a bit of work in. It's but the other thing, like going back with early socialization, where a lot of people believe you have to introduce your pup to 100 different people a day. You can actually do that by just putting a little mat down beside you in a coffee shop and letting them watch the world go by. It doesn't mean shoving them into people's faces. And what you were saying about hand targets and things, yeah, I agree with that. Personally, I never allow mine to take treats from anybody other than myself or Mike, for the simple reason I don't want them running up looking for food off somebody. I want them that they're not afraid, but they're cautious of strangers, kind of stranger danger, like with kids. You don't want them overly friendly. You don't want them going off with anybody.
Yeah.
Their safety is my priority.
Yeah. And I agree. I don't have anyone I would recommend nobody give treats, especially because they're such high value for a dog, like high food rewards for a dog. They should only really come from immediate caregivers, anyone looking after the dog, and for lots of different reasons. But also to let you know, if you have a nervous dog and you're using treats from a stranger to overcome that anxiety, that doesn't work. You're actually poisoning the treat. So if you're nervous of something, and the poor rats get a hard time at me because I always pick on the rats. But if you're nervous of a rat, and I say to you, you can have €500 if you take it off the rat. That's not a good experience for you if you're nervous of rats. You might go up and take the money and grab and run, but the whole experience of taking the incentive is kind of, as we say, poisoned. It doesn't really work effectively. So the most rewarding food can be is from somebody that the dog can trust, who the dog trusts, and that should be an immediate caregiver. And like that, you said, you don't want people or dogs running up and expecting food from children in the park or people in the park or going up to people's picnic. And then if they never get it, it really sets it off as, your dog is not necessarily going to think that's an option. And so you will have more freedom later on to have a dog who's under protective control when they're off lead in a public environment. So I'd be very much on that, especially with, when touch that I said, the dog would come up and maybe touch someone, that's fine, and interact with someone by their own free choice. And then they would go back to their caregiver to get a treat. And that's such a simple little exercise to teach a dog. And you do get to the point very quickly where they don't need treats, but it allows the dog to not be fearful of the approaching hand or the scary hand, or in any kind of scenario, both for veterinary visits, for grooming, for suddenly people putting out their hand. I know it happened to me, actually. It was about a couple of months ago, and I was speaking to someone in the park, and I had one of my dogs with me, and a little child came up and now this is a little toddler, and it's not the toddler's fault, but came up and pulled my dog's tail. Now, I don't know if it had been any other dog. My dog was particularly tolerant. And so she kind of turned around and then looked at me going, what do I do? But that could have gone very, very wrong, in another situation. So the fact that having my dog's trust and engagement, if something suddenly happens, is really, really important. And people forget that that's you can't get that without, putting in the time, putting in the energy, making them feel safe when they're secure, making sure that you almost have this little protective bubble around their needs and you're in tune with them. If you completely ignore your dog when they're fearful, if you put your dog into situations where they're uncomfortable by forcing them, or like handing them around, passing the parcel, or treats come from other people or things like that, then you're not gonna build that relationship of safety. And we all have that person that we can talk to, well, hopefully in an emergency on a human size, who'll fix all the problems, and that makes you feel safe. I know I can ring my mother at a drop of a hat, and I know she'll fix all the problems in the world, and I'm very lucky. And you want that for your dog as well. So something.
Oh, you're frozen. You've gone.
Did I
To
freeze?
rely on you, and
Oh,
I think
there.
that's important.
You froze for a bit there, but then you came back.
Yeah, no, I think we're all back now. I know internet is so unstable in Ireland, especially in the mornings and the afternoons and evenings.
So for me, I'm slightly different. I'm a bit different to all those. So the biggest thing I try and teach people to do, because we're humans generally, most of the time, we're kind of people pleasing. And once you learn to say no, no, you can't touch my dog. That's very liberating. Now, my thing's a little bit skewed. My last three dogs have all been rescue dogs, and all with their own little issues. So with my last girl, Ava, very nervous of people. In the 9 years that I had her, I didn't let anybody say hello to her out on the walk, not one. But people in the house could, because it was a house, a safe place. With Abe, who you met earlier, very, very worried about people who would bark. However, he learned very, very quickly that when someone put their hand in their pocket, there was food in there. So I'd say to people, well, you can throw him a treat, it's not a problem. But now he'll walk up, he might nudge your hand and go, they're in there, mate. So he then gets a treat. But if I'm watching him, so if I think he's a bit more worried, come on, mate, this way, and he comes away. I'm very lucky that the group of people that I kind of walk with and interact with, they listen to me. So if I say, watch for this, watch for that, they're all very polite. They all ask me if I can, if he can't. So for him, it's worked really, really well, because now people aren't a scary thing, not as much as it was before, because they might have chicken, and he quite likes chicken. So that could be quite a good thing. But he doesn't jump up. He's not forceful. He'll take one step back and kind of go, do you have food? If I think he looks worried, we go, come on, we go somewhere else. So it's a little bit different, but I think saying no is a wonderful thing people should learn.
Well, you said two really good points there. So saying no 90% of the time is absolutely brilliant. And you said another thing, which was really, really important, which I forgot to leave out, is throwing the treat is fine. And that's what we use in treat or treat. So throwing the treat as opposed to handing a treat is a totally different experience. And so I would completely agree with what you've said there. And it does depend on your environment. It does depend on, your ability to read your dog. And some people are, think that they're good and they're maybe not so much. And then I don't know, we have a lot of problems in this country where, like, for example, I was out assessing a dog the other day, and the guardian had done everything they could in their power. They had a nervous dog, and somebody asked could they pet the dog. He said no. He also body blocked the person from seeing the dog. The person put out their hand, and now we have a bite. So we're now in a court scenario, or we're now in a illegal scenario, and a lot of the time it's really, really difficult, because sometimes the person, maybe he needed to get his no a bit stronger and become more scary himself. But sometimes people just don't listen, and that's soul destroying, isn't it? People just seem to think that they are entitled to come and interact with your dog, and that's.
Oh, you're gone again. You're frozen again.
Well, I find I'm very good at saying no, especially to children, because neither of mine are. We don't have children in the house. So the dogs don't know what children are. They've never been socialized with kids. And there's no need for children to come up, because they're large. They're medium, large sized dogs. They're cute. The problem I had with my larger one, the older one, is that he has elbow and hip dysplasia and he has bad arthritis. So he's in pain. He was diagnosed when he was 14 months old. So he's always lived a life of pain. So I've always been very protective of him. And there was one day I had a puppy with me. Kids were playing with the puppy. Next off, I hear this big yelp. I look around, and one of the kids had tried to sit on his back. So no, children are not allowed near my dogs for that simple reason, is that the dogs could easily knock them over. They could hurt the dog can react, and then, as you say, Susie, you're in a bite scenario. There's no point in saying, oh no, he'd never bite. All dogs are capable.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Push the limit. The other thing we have over here, I don't know what it is around your area, but we have drone deliveries nonstop. The dogs in this area are going mental. My pair, each time they hear a drone, they run out to look at it to come back in for their treats. They love
yeah,
them. They love them.
yeah,
They've associated them with treats. It's as simple as that. These things drop boxes, they get treats.
yeah.
But the rest of them, I've seen dogs losing it in the park. Drone
Yeah,
flies
it's
by,
so
they
alien to
go
them.
mental. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't know, I'm not a fan of them myself anyway. But yeah, it's we're on a whole other, now are we going to be doing drone socialization or drone
Yeah.
life skills? Yeah, we
The
don't have
electric
them in my
scooters are
area.
bad enough. Electric scooters are bad enough. They're actually terrifying because you don't hear them to the last minute and they're on the footpath. Then you have
Yeah,
the electric bikes. We're just about getting through skateboard socialization, bicycle socialization. Now we have all these electric stuff coming. And then, of course, the drones. The drones are not the easiest. I was lucky my neighbor behind me was doing the test run for the drones, and they were telling me, right, if you hear noises, and I said, no, you tell me exactly when it's arriving because I want to get my dogs used to it. So
yeah,
I had that advantage from safe distance.
yeah,
Um, and it took about a week. Each time they heard, like mine are fine with fireworks, so that's okay. So I know what they can tolerate. So each time a drone came by, if they looked at the drone and looked back at me, they got a big handful of treats. Simple.
yeah.
And we worked from there. But I'm just seeing other dogs going crazy. And I mean, it's getting very, very difficult for guardians to know what to socialize for, what to socialize, what to do.
Yeah, it is, and the list is getting longer and longer of things that we need to potentially prep our dogs for. And then it comes back to that, making sure from a very early age, I suppose, breeder is so important, parents are so important. I'm still, I don't know, a big fan of early neurological stimulation, where we're doing little things with the puppies in the litter and building up their tolerance and their resilience to things, so that I always describe it for people that, from a socialization point of view for a human, that, if you see a zebra walking down the street, that looks alien, but in your head, you go, well, that looks like a horse. I can put it in that box. And so that I'm going to behave the same way if I see a zebra, I see a horse. So if your dog is exposed to enough things at a gentle level, then if they find something novel or hear something new or smell something, then they just need a category to put it in or a box to put it in to go, well, actually, okay, that's a little bit scary, but it sounds like this or it looks like this. So I wouldn't get people to maybe be overwhelmed by, that's not what you want to be when you're actually exposing your dogs or having, I'm going to go back to, life skills, which is, again, a much better term. It's just trying to have a number of things or try to look at it as a whole. And also like that is, the dog doesn't have to sit in the drone. The dog might have to hear it, or maybe you want to play some, noises in the background as your puppy grows up in your home, just, ambient or sounds and in the environment. You can get loads of them on a low level and just, prep your dog. Like, we're getting a lot of firework dogs now at the moment, but it's too late. It's too late. It's too close to Halloween. We're getting fireworks everywhere. This is something that you needed to do from a sound desensitization starting June or July and build it up slowly depending on how fearful your dog is. But like, even if you have a little puppy and your puppy is born in like, I don't know, past Halloween time, like November, December, then you probably want to think about, playing some fireworks sounds on a low level, in your home to prep them for next year. So they're not going to go, oh my God, what is this fireworks sound that they haven't heard all year round? And it becomes totally novel for them then and fearful of them. So yeah.
Microwave popcorn is great for that.
I've never heard that one before. That's a good one. Yeah. And so, because you don't want to get into the scenario, nothing is worse. Mine aren't afraid of fireworks either, but there's nothing more distressing than watching a dog who's trying to climb under the smallest space and are just absolutely petrified. I was actually lucky enough. I was out with a puppy client a couple of weeks ago, and we were in a park, and we were just doing, just some recall exercises and just building up confidence. And there happened to be young lads setting off fireworks. And so we were in the thick of it, and we kind of had an emergency situation where this puppy had heard fireworks before, but we handled it pretty well, put her on my knee, talked to her, comforted her, associated with treats. And then she actually coped quite well enough that we were able to hang around while they messed with their fireworks. And by the end of it, she was, sorry?
What about the dog?
Oh, I thought the dog. Yeah. So the dog, yeah. So and by the end of the session, the dog wasn't noticing anything. It wasn't scary for her at all. She wasn't aware of the sound anymore. It never got to the point, obviously, that she was terrified. I would have taken her out and reevaluated the situation. I don't, I'm against flooding. But she got to the point in that session that just happened to happen that she was just smelling the ground, playing away. Her body language was all good. And so it was kind of one of those scenarios that at the beginning I was like, oh God, this has happened. And I'm in a lesson and I didn't prep for this. But actually we turned it around and we turned it into a fireworks desensitization session. That was okay for that dog in that particular moment. There's plenty of dogs that wouldn't be able to cope with that at all. I do understand that. But it was just kind of an opportune moment.
Do you think sometimes, though, that people they can potentially do too much, and they forget that there's an awful lot of power in sitting and doing nothing at all?
Yeah, 100%. Love sitting on a bench, love sitting, like Denise said, in a coffee shop, making your puppy feel safe, bringing a safe mat, allowing your puppy on your knee and just watching the world. We do too, a lot of the time. It's hard because at one point we were saying, no, it is doing enough. And now we're like, everybody is doing too much. So it's trying to find that balance where actually some of the best dog behavior work is doing nothing at all and just allowing them the time, especially with buses. I find buses as well. A lot of the time the puppy stops when they see a bus for the first time. The bus makes an awful lot of noise. Mm-hmm. The puppy pauses to see what's going on, and the person will not be aware of the bus, try to drag the puppy on. And all the puppy wants to see is that bus come and go and be able to assess the situation and, see what's going on and see if they're safe or not. And just giving your dog that time, especially as puppies, to just watch the world. I'm a big fan of hanging around and absolutely doing nothing, or saying to people that if you're going out with your puppy, it might, don't have a destination in mind because it might take you an hour to get there. So don't dream of doing that. Just go out for a period of time, but just potter, just wander, step, walk, sit there, watch, stand, and allow your puppy to kind of explore and watch for body language and, make them feel safe. But yeah, I'm a lover of sitting on a blanket in a park with your puppy and bringing a Kong or bringing something to do and just allowing them to watch everything.
When I think back, how often were we loitering in the shopping centre with our puppies? We're always up in the shopping centre with puppies, not actually doing anything, just sitting around having coffee. The pup sitting there with a carrot or an apple or whatever under the thing, just taking everything in. It was brilliant. And it was so easy for them then that it was just such a chilled atmosphere. But I also remember bringing a golden retriever pup up near Christmas. And once people saw that little golden ball of fluff, it was like The Walking Dead. People were coming at you with the hands out. I ended up wrapping him up in my jacket and putting him in my shoulder bag and running just to get away because it was too much. It was too much. I love the the big fabric shopping bags you can get from Tesco's and things like that? They fit a golden retriever sized pup in them, and they can hold the weight up to about 12, 14 weeks of age. They're brilliant. I used to always have one of those with me. If things got too much, the pup went in and off we went. Simple. Nobody could get at it. So.
And I was a great one for I have two children, and when they're little, and if I have a puppy around or anything like that, or even my own dog, is putting them at the bottom of the buggy or even and just wheeling them around. I've had clients get buggies for their dogs, and I never kind of controversial, but it's having that scenario where they just feel safe and secure and just can watch. It's not about exercise. It's not about anything like that. It's just being able to watch something and feel safe. That's all anyone wants to feel, is safe. So yeah, I'm a big fan of anything like that. Anything. And just it's so nice. There's really so much of your time and your life spent walking your dog that just take the time when they're little or when they're puppies or even when they're newly out of rescue, just to see what their threshold is, see what they can manage with, And if your dog can lie down and relax, and you can reward them for it, and they can be in a busy environment away from any, invasive hands, or, avoiding people or saying no, then I think that's some of the best things you can possibly start with. Especially that's what you want to do when you're in a new place. You want to have a little bit of explore. You want to sit around and watch the world, people watching. So the same should go for your dog. Just let them get their bearings.
Plus, to remember, it's the dog's walk, not yours.
Pardon?
Plus, to remember that it's the dog's walk and not yours.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
Taking your time with that and letting them really drink in the environment, and not. The biggest problem I ever see is people try and train, in the situation. So they're kind of going out and doing it. I've got to get round because it'll work. And no, you don't go for a walk then. Stay at home, get a cup of tea.
And yeah, I think you've hit a nail on the head there as well. You've got some amazing, loving all the points you're coming out with. And we do concentrate, and we're so worried about training the dog and having the dog to sit and heel and do all of these things, when actually, in fact, they can come later. They can come in time. And, you can't bring a child to Disneyland and expect them to do maths homework. So, you need to get them comfortable in the environment first. Otherwise, what's going to happen is they're going to become overstimulated and fixated, and then they're not going to be able to be calm in the environment because you've put so much pressure on them, and you're going to get frustrated with them trying to do repetitious training behavior. So I think before you do, that's the biggest problem I have. Before we can do any training in an environment, the dog has to be calm enough to be able to learn and process that information. So yeah, you're spot on. Yeah.
To write this down. So I need to write this down, or show her the recording later, so my wife understands that I can be right sometimes. It'll be quite good to show Naomi later. Look, I am right. Look,
I didn't spend all these years studying for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've got a few clients or had a few clients in the past where they've done so much training, so much work with their dogs, that the dogs lost the ability to communicate effectively in their own terms, where you now, from a professional point of view, you have to look even closer, because they're now micro movements as opposed to obvious movements. And that, I think that's quite a shame. They've got the dog they wanted, that's fine, but now the dog is more of a robot who can't make a decision, doesn't have a choice, which I think is really quite sad.
Yeah, and they often don't cope well without that person, or they don't know what to do in a novel situation because they're always being given stuff to do. And we see that with Malinois and collies, especially, and shepherds, and they can't function without direction, and then they don't cope well. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, Abe's the sort of one. We do a thing on a Friday called the Friday Gang. It's myself and a few people meet up in a field, and we let all the dogs off for a bit of a charge about, and a bit of a play, which is always quite nice.
But Abe has an interesting history, though, doesn't he? You're not, when you took him on, he was very young, and you were what, his fifth house or something?
Well, no, he was. We think he was about 3.5 months when I got him, but he'd been living with an old man who had an older shepherd as well. And something happened, but the dogs got taken into a kennel. So bearing in mind that I got Abe at about 3.5 months, when I got him, he'd already been in a home and 2 different kennels before I got him. So for Abe, people coming in the home or people approaching means he's getting taken away from something. So that's where his kind of fear really comes from. But in this Friday Gang, when he's running about, because he's not particularly a confident boy, he's a bit of a wuss. If he gets a dog that's maybe sort of playing with him a little bit too rough, he always runs back and stands between my legs. The dogs are still having a go at him and playing, but he's sitting there going, "Dad, can you have a word?" But it's quite sweet. So the main thing I've got him to do is to check in with me a lot to make sure he knows where I am. And secondly, if you feel worried, come and stand by me and I'll help you out. But in the same vein, so he's got a little girlfriend who's around roughly about a 15-month-old boxer who, as we know, nuts, but adorably nuts. She's a bit infatuated with him. She washes his face constantly. She French kisses him all the time. So sometimes I'll stand there and go, no, you deal with it yourself. Go on, you go over there, and you can let her know to not touch you, but not in a nice way. and he's just started now to communicate as a dog should communicate, to kind of go, look, I'm not overly happy, and the dogs are starting to listen. So it's quite nice, and that's not me doing tons of training. That's me allowing him that little safe space to perform and get used to his environment. I mean, he's come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. He's so much better than he was. He's still a git, but he's but he's a lot better than he was. And we then get this little face like that.
Oh, look at him.
Yeah, like butter would melt his mouth, bless him. So yeah, I think there's such a benefit to not doing much at all sometimes.
Yeah, but you've just totally built up his complete trust, and that didn't happen from, there's a lot of, even if it's not, doesn't feel like work, there's a lot of work that comes into that, like the doing nothing, and you have to, yeah. And a lot of the time a lot of people don't just want to get their walk and their bits and their training over and done with, and it's becoming so regimented, and they don't think about I always tell people, I'm like, well, if you're going to sit around and just chill out, take that out of the time that you would have gone for a walk. Just don't go for a walk. But we're so programmed that we need to walk the dog for a certain length of time, and they need to run the legs off themselves, and they need to do this and that, and actually that's not necessarily what your dog needs at that particular time.
It can be quite tricky as well for a trainer. So in that scenario, you're doing a one-to-one, and the trainer knows the value of doing nothing.
Yeah.
But then the person you're with is kind of thinking, we're not doing anything. So the trainer then starts thinking, oh, maybe. So a lot of trainers kind of lose they forget to explain what's going on. And they forget to explain what the body language is doing, what the dog's going through, to reassure the person you're with, actually, we're not doing anything physically, but your dog's really working hard at the moment. that brain is really going for it. So that's where it can be, I think, a bit tricky for trainers sometimes.
Yeah, and I would encourage any trainers who find that difficult to go out if their own dog, or if they have a familiar dog they can do that with, and go and practice and watch that skill and find out how they can best articulate to their client what is actually going on. Because it feels like you go in because the expectations, I don't know about where you are, but where I am, they want, obviously this magic wand formula, and you want somebody to come in and go boom, 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 and almost have 50 different things, but the dog can't cope with that. No dog can do that. So, and often, actually funny, a good example of that is, when I do a good bit of settle training, but not on cue. I'm very much a fan of the dog learning to relax themselves. And that's one of the things I do for a lot of dogs, or teach a lot of people how to teach the dog that. And that's one of the biggest things I get back when I get feedback back, or I check in how a dog is. They're like, why didn't we teach this before? Why aren't we doing something like this? Because we all put emphasis on the dog engagement and engagement. And everyone forgets to actually go, when they have that moment, God, my dog is relaxing, don't disturb them. We all have that train of thought where like, no, leave them be, because I'm now getting 5 minutes of peace from my adolescent dog. Let's not interact. And I said, well, he's not getting any reinforcement for that. Nobody's telling him he's a good boy for just chilling out and relaxing. And that's something that you have to do. You have to give it's very easy for me to tell Mark there to go lie down or sit down and that he's a good boy. But I cannot tell Mark to relax. That is not something I can tell him to do it, but Mark may or may not be able to do that. Mark has to know himself how to be able to do that, how to calm himself down internally, and also be able to understand what the concept is. And the same as your dog. So telling your dog to go lie down or going to bed or anything like that is not the same as your dog having the capability of understanding what relaxing is. And that will only come from that reinforcement and that engagement from switching off and relaxing. And I think a lot of people forget, like, that is a wonderful skill that you can teach a dog,
And there's a huge difference between good boy, well done, and good boy, well done. Right?
Yeah.
If your dog's laying down, don't do the latter.
Isn't it really funny though, when you're trying to encourage people, when your dog has done that and you get that response and they're like, good dog, and I'm like, okay, calm down. Yet when you're trying to get them to do a recall, when you're trying to get them to call the dog back, they're like, come on, Bob.
Yeah,
and
come
so,
back.
Bob, I'm like, you're just like, oh, Switch that around, people, please.
Yeah.
Calm when he's calm, excitable when he's excitable. But yeah, it's yeah.
I always
People,
find it really, really funny. I mean, because with the amount of people that I've met over the years, you have, and I understand people are people, and some people can naturally be energetic and enthusiastic, and then there's some people that literally they can't do it. I worked with a guy once with a yellow Labrador, and he was quite posh. The dog was called Hector, and he had no wrinkle. So I went to see him, and I just said, "Oh, can you call your dog?" And no one ever lie. The guy just went, "Hector, do come." And I went, "That's not really going to help you." So I called Hector, and he got over to me, and I did a bit of rough play, and he ran off, and I pulled him back, and it was fun. Trying to get this guy to do that was never ever going to happen in the slightest. So you have to almost tap into his bit. So we ended up working a cue. So the do come bit that happened before, or yeah, just before breakfast, just before dinner, just before throwing a toy, everything else. So eventually the do come was a prelude to something wonderful happening, which meant he could then call his dog back a bit better, a bit easier. Yeah. But it is funny seeing some people, and it's just not them, is it? Like they just
no, and you can't take it.
Fine.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like them. You can't, yeah, you can't. You don't want somebody to be out of their comfort zone either.
No. No.
Yeah, so it's also adapted.
But it's then also very embarrassing because then whenever I saw them after that, just out on walks, Hector would rush up to me.
Yeah.
It's that bloke. I love that bloke.
So exciting and interesting.
And it is terrible because, and again, I see a lot of dogs, and if I see them in different scenarios, they all want to come rushing over there because they know me. And of course, people then get a little bit upset sometimes, going, "Oh, they do it for you." But I see this dog once a week for an hour for a lot of fun and some treats and some.
You're a novelty.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I'm
absolute
the fun
novelty.
Uncle. This is fantastic, and that's what, if you're living with that dog 24/7, if you're going through, say, adolescence, it's a very frustrating time for the dog and the human, and it's hard sometimes because we're humans. We take it personally. You've chewed that slipper just to annoy me. You know what I mean? And we do feel that way. So sometimes it's very hard to go, good boy, when you've got a destroyed couch. But as I say to people, sometimes you have to say good boy through gritted teeth. And that's okay too. But try and get into the habit of, look, this is not personal. They're going through a tough time at the moment, and we just help them get through that. But
it's never personal. Like it's so funny, and it's like children as well. If you're going to be offended by a toddler, well then, maybe you need some personal help yourself. But because it's again, it's never personal.
I have to say, I do love the adolescent phase. Like with all of mine over, I do. I love it.
She's strange like that.
Yeah. It was always the coming of age, because I know with mine over the last 15, 16 years. There was always a point where they could suddenly reach the counter. And it was the excitement that day where they could put their paws on the counter and they were like, "Oh, I can do it." And I'm there, "Yes, you can." It was like, yay. I'm so excited. You're a teenager. But to me, it was always, I'd say 9 out of every 10 of them, it was the day they put their paws on the counter. Because they could reach. They wanted to see what I was doing because that counter was super exciting and I was always dropping stuff off it. But the fact they could put their paws up meant I am a big boy now.
Yeah, and there's a lovely. I can't say
so much fun.
I can't say I love it as much as you that stage.
No one does.
No one does. The normal is not. It's a difficult phase you have to
life
get
choices.
I do love the risk taking, and I do love the curiosity that it brings. And the kind of, so when you call your dog and they look at you going, "Who are you? I've never met you before in my life. This river is way more interesting. Thank you very much." I do love that.
Yeah, you do get that look every so often. "You're not my mom."
Yeah.
And they go off in the other direction.
But I can't, it is lovely. But I can't say now, Denise, I'd have to say I would rather skip it on a whole in my life than, just jump out by that part, because it is a really, really tough time, I think, for
it is for a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, look at the pounds over here. How many adolescent dogs end up in the pounds because people just cannot.
Yeah, and I think half the battle is obviously telling people like that. that your dog is still in that need for kind of controlled socialization, and they're still growing and their brain is still developing, and that it is a phase. And that I do tell people, like a huge amount of people do give up their dogs. You're not alone. This is what is it, what is normal. And like you said, I don't love that he'll grow out of it. I always want to tackle it there and then, because they might not grow out of it. And but when they're doing some of the behaviors in adolescence that would be considered, sometimes I do say, well, this isn't going to be forever. It's you haven't wasted all your time doing all the vast amount of work that you've put in your dog, and now all of a sudden in these couple of months or these few months is it out the window, it will come back. I do try and give them that reassurance.
I do kind of try and reassure people, like, everything you've put in before this hit will come back stronger when they get through it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we started this and then we blinked and it's about an hour has already flown past.
I know, yeah.
So it's probably a good time to maybe wrap it up and do another one another time.
Okay, well, quick note. If anybody, well, I share Suzi's blogs left, right, and center. So that's dog behavior and training. You'll see them on all the Into Dogs group pages and Dog Sense. You can also find, what's your website? Is it dogbehavior.ie?
Really creative. I was so creative when I was coming up with this, dogbehavior.ie. And everybody said to me, come up with a business name. You know me, Denise. I haven't got a creative bone in my body. But that worked out quite well for me because,
It's perfect.
But anyone's welcome to reach out and ask any questions without any pressure of booking a consultation or anything like that. And I'm always happy to help or point people in the right direction. That's mostly what I do these days, because it's, in a bad way, so busy because there's a lot of behavior problems. But obviously I'm very privileged to get to work with dogs. But I'll always try and make the best decision for your dog. And sometimes, and quite a lot of the time, it's not necessarily seeing me. So, but anyone's welcome to reach out and ask any questions they like.
Okay, and you can find us pair on intodogs.net and, of course, Association of Into Dogs on the public page on Facebook. And we now have a new YouTube channel, so you'll find all our videos and interviews and stuff up there. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and hope you enjoyed the chat.